Good afternoon. We welcome everyone here to our webinar this afternoon. This will be the first of many in the upcoming weeks. Our focus today will be on our AEDY applications and the technical assistance and training that we'll provide through the webinar today. We will also provide a webinar this coming Thursday, same time, 2 p.m. My name is Gina Colarossi, and I am a member of the PDE team working here with AEDY, and I'm joined with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Angela Kirby, and I'm the director here at Patton Harrisburg.
So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and we'll get started right away. We understand how busy everyone's days are. Okay, so on our agenda today, first and foremost is to review our application process and the return of the applications to you new this year with our online management system through Leader Services. And so with the send back through our application review, there is what we will define as a provisional approval. The provisional approval came back to each of the AEDY providers, whether you're an in-house LEA or a private provider, with maybe several different areas identified as needing some type of revision and return through the Leader Services system to PDE for finalization. And so today our focus will be on 4 specific areas of the provisional approval. The complaint process, and that's inclusive of the local complaint process today, the English Learner Plan, MTSS behavior, positive behavior support plans. And then in addition, we'll talk a little bit about the professional development and technical assistance plan that we have outlined for the upcoming school year, specific with some on-demand training resources, face-to-face professional development, and any technical assistance that, that you feel you need to get this accomplished. Okay, and so within the course of the provisional approval, we have a 90 calendar day provisional approval letter. This year, our communications, the majority of them will come out via the notification system within Leader Services system. And so what we would like everyone to do is just take a note to your email that would come through for Leader Services. And it is through there that all of our communications, the majority of them will be sent. So within that communication send back, we returned the majority of our applications late last week. And within some of those applications, we have a 90-day provisional approval to operate. We understand and are certainly committed to supporting with that training and technical assistance. However, given the specific requirements that are now part of our AEDY process, we must ensure that the components of your program are up to the level and standard that we're being held to as well. And so we certainly have a commitment to making these changes and supporting you through your reapplication or application with our feedback and support.
We're seeing that folks are getting, posting some comments, wanting to talk. What we'd like to do is to just hold all comments till the end, unless there's an issue with the feedback or hearing us. And if so, please type that into the Q&A if you can't hear us. But it looks like folks can hear us. At the end, we will be looking at your specific questions and we'll give you feedback. But we want to go through this first so that everybody hears the same thing, and then hopefully that will alleviate some of the issues. Okay.
Okay, through the local complaint process. So there's 2 parts of our complaint process. The first part would fall specifically within the local level, and then should that complaint not be resolved within the local level, the expectation would be that the LEA, in working with that AEDY provider or the in-house LEA serving as that AEDY provider, would submit the application to the Pennsylvania Department of Education for our follow-up. key point here in the complaint process is that ultimately the LEA, the sending LEA, is responsible regardless of what program the child is being educated in. If it's an in-house LEA that is down the street from your school district and you're sending to that program, or whether it's a private provider, in either circumstance through this complaint process, the LEA is ultimately responsible for any complaints that occur within either of those programs. Knowing that that is the case, communication within that complaint process must be driven not just from the AEDY provider, in-house or private, but to that LEA. So for example, if a family files a complaint and I'm a private provider, I must alert the sending LEA of that student that a complaint has been filed and that you are actively working together towards that process. And so when you consider the application, whether you're a sending LEA or you're in the in-house provider or private provider, the expectation is that your local complaint process is one and the same and working side by side towards resolve towards the issue. In addition, the process must include the updated PDE language required to ensure the accessibility of the process for parents. That accessibility could mean the sending of the application, the sending of the complaint so that the family understands how to submit a complaint to you. And it could also mean the access required per language. If the family is needing the document, translated, it is the expectation that the family have that access to that information in their primary language. LEAs must make a good faith effort to provide parents with multiple ways to file a complaint and without requiring a written signature. And so the format is a rewritable document. Certainly we do need the family's name, and you need the family's name in order to address it, but we would not want a complaint to be held up for an actual signature on the complaint. So we are requesting that families have multiple opportunities to receive the complaint process and the form, and that they have access to file it in multiple ways. You will be able to identify that for us on the Leader Services system by describing how it is that you will provide that complaint. For example, if I am the sending LEA, I may decide that I'm going to provide that complaint prior to the informal hearing so that the family is aware via that informal hearing that there is a complaint process available to them. That is in addition to their due process, that is not to replace it. The other way, certainly that many of you have indicated that you will provide parents that access is within the in-house or private provider program, that you would make that accessible to them through their transition meeting or their multiple transition meetings that occur prior to their 45-day presumptive exit date from you.
So Gina, a lot of folks on Thursday received feedback that their complaint process did not meet the PDE guidance, and yet currently on the PDE website, the guidance does not reflect these components. Can you share with those who are attending our webinar today what PDE is going to do to mitigate that so folks have a compliant complaint process?
Sure, and we do understand the time factor as well. And so the first thing that we will be doing is updating our link there on the Leader Services website so that when you go to that section, you will have guidance directly there that you will be able to refer to in comparison to what you originally submitted, and just check the boxes off and confirming that you have all of the components readily explained to us so that we can approve that section.
And I think one of the things that folks will see that's pretty different is the onus is really on the LEA to make this accessible to parents, right? So we've received feedback, from our settlement agreement and other, lawyers and stuff working with us, that the goal of this process is to have parents have ease of accessibility and not to include barriers. So for example, on the document that we had in PDE in the past, and the document that many of you submitted, it indicated that parents had to actually state which violation they felt, their child, what violation, whether it was a violation of IDEA or Chapter 14, and they had to actually specify that. And we got feedback saying, what parent knows that? They don't. Parents need to have ease of accessibility and being able to share what their concerns are. And ultimately, the LEA is responsible. So as Gina said, if the private provider says, well, here's our process, that's fine, but the private provider must inform the LEA. And so it's all about making sure that there's ease of accessibility for parents to effectively share their complaints if they believe the system is not supporting their students effectively. So we'll be making sure to make that available, and it'll be available soon. So that's why when we got all this feedback saying, well, what do you mean the complaint process? I uploaded what the model PDE had. We're going to be updating a new model, and we'll be sharing with that with folks through Leader.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next area that a lot of people got feedback on was the English Learner Plan. So let's just start with what the expectation is. Many LEAs provided us with the plan that their district uses district-wide. And it is not to negate that that is not appropriate. But what we need to know here is, how is that plan being implemented in that AEDY? So it's not sufficient to just upload your district's plan. Additionally, we had a lot of private providers saying, we're just doing whatever the district does. That's not okay either. So AEDY facility may have, a private provider may have multiple LEAs sending to them. And so ultimately they need to obviously address the components here in how they are integrating English language instruction into daily instruction, so into the 990 hours. So one of the things that are major misconceptions around EL instruction is that it's like a tutoring, or it's something that's done in addition. And it's very clear under the Every Student Succeeds Act, under ASA, that planned instruction in English language acquisition needs to be included throughout the course of students' instruction. So when the student is having social studies or mathematics, that there's purposeful intent in how the child is also acquiring the academic language necessary to acquire those content areas. English language support is not an add-on, it's not tutoring, and it is not sitting kids in front of a computer or an iPad. So this plan needs to be reflective of how you are doing these things in your AEDY facility, whether that's an LEA in-house program or whether that is a privately run program. You will see in Leader Services that there is a document that includes the components that you're going to see on these slides. How do you go about identifying Ls? How do you assess Ls, and not just assess them initially, but how are you using ongoing formative assessment to monitor their progress in English language acquisition? What does instruction look like, and how is that happening in the AEDY facility, and how does it differ depending on the child's English language proficiency? So for a student who is brand new to the States and is just learning English, their instruction is going to look different than the student who is what we call bridging and is making progress towards the academic language. So we need to know how that's happening, how you're staffing it, and what materials and resources you're using. We also need to make sure that there's planned integration around both instruction and social, so it's not to isolate these students and create mini EL programs in AEDY facilities, but that there's a planned integration and instruction. The ongoing assessment and reclassification. So we've heard from some folks saying, well, we wouldn't reclassify because we would wait till they go back to the ascending LEA. Ultimately, the assessments need to be ongoing and monitoring progress, and if it's appropriate to reclassify, having a student in an AEDY facility would not preclude them from reclassification. So you need to constantly be monitoring that and making sure that that's the place. And then, as you know, under ESSA, there is a plan for monitoring Ls after they've exited. So for example, if sending LEA sent a private provider a student who's an L, there is a time where they have to monitor their progress afterwards, and so that needs to be done even if the student is no longer considered L for direct services. There needs to be documentation, and this documentation needs to share like what instruction looks like, what data looks like, how you're complying, and ultimately how you're also communicating with parents for that. So what we have done is we have created an on-demand webinar specifically for AEDY, and we're going to share this presentation at the end. There's a hyperlink there into this EL plan. It's about an hour presentation, and what it does is it sets the statutory requirements under ESSA for these components for all Ls, regardless of their placement, and then what that may look like. In addition, this webinar will point you to multitudes of resources as you begin to plan this out. As we think about this work, one of the critical pieces and some of the feedback we've received is denying students access. And so it is really clear that we need you in your AEDY-L plan to really specify what this looks like in your setting. And when monitoring occurs, this will be one of the things that will be monitored for. So if you indicate we're integrating here and this is how we're doing it for our level 3 learners, we're going to be looking to see that those things are in place. So we would like to make sure that you clearly understand that. One of the things that LEAs and I think private providers have found helpful is taking the document that's in the LEADER website and just adding a column to the right-hand side. And they just write narrative for each of those 6 components. This is how we're doing it, etc. And uploading something that aligns with that and clearly articulates what you're doing should be sufficient. And if it isn't, we will give you feedback on that. But note, whatever you indicate in that plan, we will be looking for when we come out and monitor, whether that's a face-to-face monitoring or a desk monitoring. Anything else to add to that, Gina, that I may have missed?
I don't think so. I think that the important piece is that all students who are identified as being L need to be served in AEDY programs, and that leaving the LEA even for a 45-day presumptive requires that support and service to follow them, and that the important piece of having the L plan within the AEDY application is to verify that support and service that's being provided.
So the next area where a lot of folks had feedback was on the MTSS behavior support. And again, this is where there's some departure from some of the technical assistance that we've afforded as the department last year. And it's in response to legal feedback that we've received not only at the federal level, but at the local level. So one of the things that is very clear is that all AEDY providers must have a multi-tiered system of support for addressing behavior. Now, that does not mean everybody has to use a model such as school-wide positive behavior interventions and support, but what it does mean is that everybody needs to have a multi-tiered system of support for behavior. So the premise of any type of multi-tiered system of support is that there are universal approaches in place for all kids, and that before more intensive interventions are utilized, that those universal supports are in place. Now, obviously, a student who has is entering an AEDY program has behaviors that have put them in a situation where their behaviors are significant and have warranted this placement. But that's not to negate that within that placement, there has to be universal approaches to teaching expectations. There needs to be universal approaches to teaching not only the expectation, the rules and the requirements of the program. And that this shouldn't be something that is, an I got you. There needs to be a universal approach before individual student positive behavior support plans are put into place. So we know that those things are happening simultaneously when a kid enters, but what is clear is that there is a purposeful way that you're teaching and proactively addressing the expectations for school in this new environment that the students find them in. So the expectation is that you either have a model in place or that you commit yourself this year to building out a model. In order to receive approval this year, if you do not have this type of model in place, you would have to commit a narrative to how you were going to go about building that model. And the department will provide you with technical assistance and support in how to do that. So if you do not have a universal approach for how you're dealing with behavior and you haven't built a multi-tiered system of support in place, that is an expectation for moving forward, but we are here to support you on your journey as we do that. Some folks have just wholesale adopted school-wide PBIS, and that's fine, but we're not specifically endorsing any type of model. What we're endorsing more is that kind of conceptual model of a multi-tiered system of support. But school-wide PBIS absolutely checks the boxes when it comes to the expectations around ensuring that you have a universal approach. The other piece around the universal approach is that everybody involved in the lives of the student in that facility, whether it's people that are addressing them in the context of specials, or in their L plan, or in administrators or janitors, that they all are using similar language and addressing behaviors in the same way, proactively trying to support students in that method. So that's the whole kind of conceptual piece. This is something that is a requirement. We recognize that there's going to take time for people to put that in place. So the goal is that you would develop a plan to look at what that looks like for your particular site. We have created an AEDY specific MTSS behavior support webinar on demand. The hyperlink is in this PowerPoint, and you will be able to avail of that, and it kind of just walks you through some thinking on what this might look like in an AEDY facility. We know when we think about multi-tiered systems of support, whether it be for academics or behavior, they're absolutely locally contextualized. What this looks like in an AEDY program in a high school where you have one teacher is going to look very different from a private provider that has multiple sites. So this is very locally contextualized, but we have people here to support you as you think about that plan moving forward. Okay, the next area where a lot of people received feedback was on the behavior support plan. And I'm honestly going to say that a lot of folks put up things that they called a behavior support plan, but it was not positive in nature. And so the difference here than what you'll have seen in previous year's application, but what the expectation is moving forward, is that plans that are developed for students are positive in nature, and they address very specific components around motivation and reinforcement. You will see this language in both IDEA and Chapter 14 specific to students with disabilities. However, for the purposes of AEDY, the expectation is the behavior support plans that are being put in place contain these elements, regardless of whether the child is a student with a disability or not. Again, the goal here is prevention of problem behavior, so utilizing antecedent strategies to prevent behavior and to encourage and or teach replacement behaviors that serve the same function. Addressing environmental conditions, and adjusting the instruction to meet the needs of the students. We want to reinforce behaviors that we want to see, and then we also know that consequences, meaning anything that happens immediately after a behavior, not good or bad, that we are looking at that and we're looking to see how we are purposefully trying to use reinforcement to increase the likelihood that the students will continue to exhibit the types of behaviors that we need to see. We have provided an annotated link to the patent positive behavior support plan. You will see it's a comprehensive document that has all annotated examples throughout. You may simply adopt that as a model if you like. It's open source, it's free, you may avail of it, or you may avail of your own, but the components that you see on this slide are the things that we need to see. Additionally, we have created an on-demand webinar that explains this, and you will see the components of that in the hyperlink at the bottom of this page. Last but not least, we are here to support this. We recognize that this is a different shift from in the past, but the department is absolutely committed to ensuring that students who are in these facilities are getting the services and supports that they need. Not only that's required by law, which is obvious, a first line of standard, but ultimately that is making sure that these students get the supports they need so they can be integrated appropriately back into their home school and graduate college and career ready. So to that end, we will be holding monthly webinars on the third Thursday of every month, beginning in September, and the first one would be September 19th from 3 to 4:30. These webinars will serve to provide you with pertinent statewide updates, as well as mini introductions to face-to-face trainings that we will be offering specific for AEDY facilities. So the first webinar that we have will be a review of the DOJ settlement agreement. Then we will also be reviewing the updated BEC that we hope to have available at that time, which will be the Basic Ed Circular for this work. And then we will be working to do a brief introduction on utilizing an MTSS behavior framework to address disproportionate representation of culturally and linguistically diverse students in AEDY facilities across Pennsylvania. So we'll be introducing this during that webinar, but there will be then a follow-up face-to-face training to support that particular content. And those dates are already established, and we will be getting them out through our patent courseware system. However, for your planning purposes today, we have hyperlinked in the second to last paragraph a training plan statewide that lists the dates that we currently have available. In October, our session will be specific to the online leader system, and at that time we'll be able to provide you updates on the monitoring, as well as an introduction to supporting English language learners in AEDY facilities, utilizing evidence-based, culturally relevant English language instruction. So hopefully you're going to see a common theme throughout all of this, which is around addressing disproportionality as we look at AEDY facilities across the state. Not only disproportionality of students of color, but also disproportionality of English learners and students with disabilities. November through May, we'll still hold the third Thursday of the month, but we will really use these webinars to really try to address the needs that we're seeing, both from on-site monitoring as well as the feedback you give us as to the needs that you have. So at the end of today, you'll see two things. You'll see a hyperlink to a draft training plan, as well as we want to make sure that all LEAs and private providers know that all patent training, so the hyperlink where it says professional development described here, that's specific to AEDY. But we also want to know that all patent training is open to LEAs and private providers who run AEDY facilities at no cost. And the patent training calendar is also hyperlinked here. We will have patent consultants who are available to provide you with technical assistance, both virtually and on-site at no cost. And to make those requests, we have an aedy@patent.net email address. You will see in the draft professional development plan, if you click on that link, that we also will be offering free, no-cost safety care training as a way to address proactive antecedent strategies to de-escalate and minimize problematic behaviors. But if problematic behaviors do occur and warrant a hold, how that hold is done in a way that is very respectful of the student and also de-escalates the problem behavior. And lastly, this model really does a nice job of emphasizing the deconstruction of a hold if that happens, and how you as adults monitor antecedent and consequences to determine environmental conditions that may be manipulated to prevent that type of hold happening in the future. So you will see in the training agenda that that is included. And for questions specific to that, there are 2 emails for specific questions around the complaint system, around anything that wasn't addressed pretty much other than the complaint. So getting into leader services, the student referral system, anything else, Gina, I'm missing?
Any of the components under your contacts, know that, you know, the contact section are the ways that we drive that information to you. So I encourage you to go back and make sure that as you update your staffing, that that's updated for us, because that is the way that we do contact you. Secondary, I would also say that, and this is obviously a primary concern of ours in terms of PDE, is that you have your credentialing of your staff up to date. along with any dates of their background checks. Know that if there is a date that has since expired, your application will be sent back and you will be required to update those immediately. So each of those sections that I just referred to in terms of contacts and certifications, they all can be addressed to PDE at our resource account, RA-ED, AEDY. We will address those on a daily basis so that we're getting back to you to ensure that you have communication and follow through on our part.
Thanks, Gina. So now I'm going to kind of go through the questions, and I'm trying to group them based on kind of similar types of questions. So there seems to be a consistent question around how long do you have? And unless you received an email that's contrary to this, and I believe there are only 2 providers or LEAs that have received that email, everybody would have 90 days to make those revisions. Folks are asking for specific feedback on your application. How did you get that? You should have received that through Leader Services, Gina?
That's correct. So when you log on to the system and you click on that rejection notice, you will see a drop down that will provide you the actual language of what the reviewers who have looked at your application over the last course of a couple weeks have responded to. If for some reason you cannot, please reach out to PDE and we'll confirm with you, looking side by side as to how to help you.
So I think that probably this question was addressed, but the question is who should be developing the plan if LEAs are sending students to another AEDY provider? If you want to know how it's provided at the AEDY program, but they're saying that they're providing according to what the LEA designates. So ultimately, if they are providing what the LEA designates, they have to, ultimately, I think we could unpack this to its furthest extent. So say, for example, you are a private provider and you have 10 sending LEAs. Ultimately, your conversation with those sending LEAs are what are the components that you know you need to have in place as we've shared today. And if those 10 LEAs have something different that they're doing and assessing, that's going to be a local contractual relationship that that provider would have with their sending LEA. That is not something that the department would weigh in on. What we will weigh in on is whether or not there's a plan in place and addresses those components. So ultimately, how you address those components, you need to negotiate that if you're a provider with those sending LEAs, but you're going to have a plan that clearly articulates how you are implementing in the context of the supports that you are providing. Questions are, will we send the slides with the links? Absolutely. And the reason we asked folks to register is that we will send you this through the registration system, and the video will be posted on the Patent YouTube channel. Looking at Veronica, she indicates that her application is still in process. Will she get feedback as well, Gina?
Absolutely, Veronica, you will. So anyone who had submitted within the first time frame that we had pushed out should have received their application. However, there were several others that we ended up going back through. But yes, you will receive feedback within, I would say, at least no more than a week's time. We are going through them daily to ensure that we're timely in our response.
So we had a question, isn't there a checkbox that can say you are using PDE's version of the support plan? There is. So if you received feedback, it could have been an error on our part, or it could have been that you uploaded something that made us think that you were also doing something different. So if you are using the PDE version of the behavior support plan, that's fine, and just follow up with the AEDY TA email for patent, and we'll make sure to check on your specific application. So we got a question is whether or not Thursday's webinar is the same as today, and yes, it is. It'll just be an opportunity for folks to ask questions. Also, when will we know if your application is approved or requires revision? Basically, everybody's, as of last week, will have 90 days to implement these systems that feedback. But we will be providing ongoing TA to folks throughout this whole process. Gina?
There will be a notification that will go out midway through to identify you have X number of days remaining if you're continuing to work, we would highly encourage you to spend the time now going through the new training videos that are available and reaching out to either PDE or Patent to assist you if you should need further assistance before returning the application.
Will the monthly meetings be recorded and available? Yes, everything is going to be recorded and available. We know folks are busy. We know that there's lots of different schedules in place. So everything will be recorded and available, and we make sure then to send that out through Leader Services so we have a consistent scale with regards to that. Yes, Thursday's meeting will be duplicative of today. The only difference will be that we'll be answering questions for the folks on. So Brian is indicating in 2 instances I clicked on the model, I was using PDE model, feedback, submit a document that's missing that I'm not required to. Okay, so Brian, if you can just send us an email at aedy@patent.net and who your LEA is, we'll try to follow up with you ASAP. Earl, I would love to have an in-person meeting at Patent. Earl, if you would like to follow up with an email to aedy@patent.net, we will absolutely follow up with you. Someone asked they have not received any feedback on their application. Vivian, if you connect with the PDE folks, and the PDE email is ra-ed AEDY. I think that's right.
Yeah, Ed for Education, AEDY.
They'll be able to try to figure out what's going on with your application. If a letter of rejection or acceptance has been received, when will we expect those?
If you have not received your application in return, you will be very shortly. So Jennifer will take a look at where you're from. If you could kindly also just reach out to that RA-ED, AEDY, we'll follow up with you individually to make sure that we don't need anything on our part. Thank you. Brian, if you could just follow up with an email to us, we'll try to get back to you with specific concerns that you have with your application. Karen is asking, should we list board policies in our complaint process? Because example, student complaint process. I don't see that, Gina. So Karen, the one thing that we caution you about is that an existing board policy does not address the linkage between LEA and the AEDY provider. Most don't. I can't specifically speak to your board policy. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you do have a board policy and you simply want to state what it includes, that is certainly fine, but to only include that as your model complaint process would be insufficient, because it does not describe how you'll be providing that model form, and it just does not describe your communication with your AEDY providers if you're the LEA sending.
Earl just asked a question. My application was approved through next June, so I still only have 90 days to make changes. And so the answer to that question is yes. Yes, many of you were approved for 3 years. However, these are they're not actually new requirements. They've always been requirements, but this is the department complying with their requirements under federal law. So yes, you would only have 90 days to make those changes, but we're here to provide support. So please feel free to email at PDE or Patent for that. Andrea, again, to offer that technical assistance. If it's specific to the L plan, PBIS, positive behavior support, MTSS, we are happy to provide that. That would be the Patent email. If it's specific to your application, questions about the application, questions about the complaint system, which everybody's going to get updated language from PDE on to reflect the guidance that we've received, that would be all go to PDE. So the next question is regarding the training videos. So when we had sent back your letters and your email, we were sure to include the referral piece because you had already applied. But what we certainly can do is go back through Leader Services prior to the sign-on and put a link there for all of the videos so that you can access them direct off of the website before you sign on. Andrea, I am monitoring the AEDY Patent website as well as one more individual, and we will get back to you as soon as absolutely humanly possible. We are in the process of fielding hundreds of emails, but we will definitely be in charge. The PDE email, hopefully you see it on the screen. It's listed here, as well as you will get, it's an RA account, so it's resource account RA-ED AEDY@pa.gov. patents is aedy@patent.net. Application, Steve says, still pending approval. Should I email PDE or patent or wait?
Steve, if you would just kindly send an email out today so that we can follow up, please send it to the RA account at PDE, and we'll make sure that we have everything we need from this end from you.
Andrea, I'm sorry you didn't get a response from me. I will definitely look for you right now when we are done and try to connect with you. When does the clock for the 90 days begin?
It would have began the day that we sent the letter, and so we will look 90 days out, 90 calendar days out, and we certainly will provide in there a notification process so that 45 days through, you have the midway point. Again, that's a decent amount of time, and so our expectation is that, you know, these revisions and the follow-through happen much prior to the 90 days, but we certainly wanted to give those folks who were building some MTSS models positive and we're doing some other processes that may require personalized training, that we give you the time to do that. That being said, if you should make those revisions and you know, watch the videos and you're good to go and resubmit in the next 10 days, we will review immediately and provide you with our follow-up.
One of the ways to try to address, since right now we're just building a team to support this work, is we've built these on-demand webinars. So I would ask that folks really do review those webinars. So we're trying to efficiently and effectively meet all of your needs. We recognize that this is a heavy lift. We recognize that these are somewhat new or updated expectations, even though they have been federal requirements for years. But we know that the enforcement of this is really critical, and so we did develop those webinars so that you can get that on-demand kind of training, and then if you still have subsequent questions, we're here to support that. But we would ask that you watch those videos first. Okay, so thank you very much, and we will forward this webinar with the PowerPoint. We'll upload it to YouTube to everybody who registered. So hopefully you registered. You wouldn't be on here if you didn't register. So we'll send it out through the registration system. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.